Sherlock Mosan here was screwed over because of the Olympic Games being held in Tokyo, and I want to tell you the real cost of the Olympics. So pay close attention. Ah, 最近団体事務所のお客さんがほとんど来ない。家賃説教書的な食べ物。債務支払うのが大変でした。めんどくせえ。うまくいけばオリンピックが街に来るとき、私はより多くの顧客を得ることができます。Olympics go back all the way to the 8th century in ancient Greece, where the ancient Greeks actually held a religious spectacle for the Greek god Zeus. Modern Games was actually presented by Frenchman Baron Pierre de Coubertin on November 25th, 1892 in Paris, and the first games were actually held in Greece in 1896. The vision that the creators had for the games was actually to promote peace, harmony, and internationalism. Since the modern games started, the grandeur, magnitude, and cost have all skyrocketed, and mostly at the second part of the 20th century, according to the Council of Foreign Relations. 何ですか?なんでこれは?この国がオリンピックを決済することを決定したという理由だけで、私はより多くの座席を支払うことを余儀なくされていますか?彼はいくつの天ぷらをこれらの北ヨーロッパを一緒に行くことができます。The modern Olympic Games requires host cities to spend billions of dollars in preparation for the games. It can cost up to 9 figures just to assemble and present the bid, only to have it rejected by the International Olympics Committee, which is the leader and guardian of the Olympic movement. During the bidding process, cities can spend anywhere between $50 to $150 million in consultants, event organizers, and travel relating to host duties. And take Tokyo for example. Tokyo lost about $150 million in its bid for the 2016 Olympics and eventually spent $75 million on its successful 2020 bid. And hosting the games is even more costly than the bidding process. Take London for example. London spent approximately 14.6 billion. You heard that right. Billion with a B in 2012 when it hosted both the Summer Games and the Paralympics, and approximately $4.4 billion of that was paid by taxpayers. Once a city wins its bid, it most commonly has to improve upon infrastructure for the large influx of people coming into the city, and things usually along the lines of housing and transportation. And let's not forget the Olympic Village, which has to host about 40,000 people, and infrastructure costs can cost anywhere between $5 to $50 billion, and it's wild. And let us not forget about security costs, especially after the 9/11 attacks. And Sydney spent about $250 million in the games of 2000, and Athens spent around $1.4 billion in the 2004 games, and costs have been in and around $1 to $2 billion ever since. And then we have the so-called white elephants, and for that I'll hand over to Sir Mo to explain to you all. And another issue that these host cities have is to do with white elephants. And these white elephants are expensive facilities that, because of their size or specific nature, have limited use post-Olympics, and the cost of these facilities can be felt for years to come. Take for example the Athens Olympics of 2004. Most of these facilities are run down, and they contributed to the national Greek debt crisis. Blimey! Back to you, Mo. Damn, I don't know what Sir Mo put in his tea today, but damn, he coming with that heat today. Leave a like if you feeling that Sir Mo energy. And then there's the issue with debt. Take Montreal for example. Montreal hosted the games in 1976, and they only paid off all of their debt in 2006. And Sir Mo already mentioned that the amount of debt that the Greeks accumulated in the 2004 games helped the country fall into a deep crisis. Eh? 何ですか?これらの人々はホテルを建てたいので私が店を出ることを望んでいますか?は?はあ。私は毎日この国にすべてをさせています。そしてこれが変わるか私を扱う方法ですか? And with the cost of hosting the games skyrocketing, revenues barely cover the expenses. Take Beijing for example. In the 2008 Olympic Games, Beijing spent around $40 billion only to earn about $3.6 billion. And what's even crazier is host cities usually don't even get a large chunk of the revenue from the hosting of the games. The Guardian, if you guys remember from earlier, the IOC, they usually get more than half of television broadcast money, which is usually the largest chunk of the money generated from the games. And it's no secret that there are studies out there that say hosting the games can bring about incredible economic benefit for the host nation, say a boost in jobs, boost in tourism, and overall economic output. But there are now studies that claim that all these reports are dubious. One study from the 2002 Salt Lake City Games actually saw that there was no long-term improvement in job employment, but more of a short-term improvement. Another study said that if employment was not already incredibly high, a large majority of the jobs that were created during the games were actually given to people that were already employed. And what's even crazier is with a large majority of the money that goes into these construction companies, restaurants and hotels actually just go to international companies, and it doesn't actually bring in money for the local economy. And you know how cities say that hosting the games will actually bring in more tourists? Well, it's actually reported that London, Beijing and Salt Lake City reported a decrease in tourism. And hey, we all know what happened with the 2021 games. Yare. Eh? より多くの財産お払い、私の振り店からおいでされた後、政府は外国人がオリンピックを観戦するために日本に入国することはできないと発表しましたか。助けて。And from everything that I've seen and read, it's said that host cities usually suffer a negative impact as opposed to the positive economic impact that is claimed. Take Brazil for example. Brazil ended up spending roughly $20 billion, and of that $20 billion, Rio ended up shouldering approximately $13 billion. Because of the deep recession that Brazil was in, Rio needed a bailout of $900 million from the federal government, and they were unable to pay their public employees. Like I said earlier, the income that these host cities generate barely cover the expenses, and as of now, Los Angeles is the only city to realize a profit, and that's mostly because they already had the infrastructure before going into the games. As you can see, hosting the games results in severe economic deficiencies, and the only time it works out, like I said in LA, is when you had the infrastructure prior to hosting games. I think, only my opinion, that host cities are better off. Not better at all, yo, but only my opinion. こんにちは。これは IOC ですか? パーフェクト。初日のためにここにいます。As always, if you got any value, make sure to decimate that like button and let me know what the most fascinating or interesting part of this video was in the comment section down below. And if you think that anyone will gain some value from this video, make sure to share it with them. And as always, I'm Motaicho. Sayonara. Nothing as it seems. Look beyond the veil, we must. The truth we shall see.